Hey guys, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time in this video. So what we want to talk about today is assessing group programming. And namely, are you doing it? And if so, when you do make that assessment, are you making changes based off of that assessment? And if you're not, what we want to do is give you a couple of really simple steps to follow so that you can begin assessing your group programming. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when it comes to assessing group programming is actually define the goal. What is the goal that you want to achieve when people attend your group classes? It doesn't matter the time frame, just what does that end spot look like? So that's the first thing that you need to have. If you just say we want people to get fit, great. What does that actually mean when you say you want people to get fit? The second thing you need to determine is how are you actually going to measure that goal? You know, when a new client walks into your gym, if they say to you, hey coach, I want to lose 20 pounds. You put them on the scale today, let's say they weigh 200, and 3 months go by, you put them on the scale again, they weigh 180, 20 pounds have been lost. We know that we have met that goal because it was very clear and easy to measure. So that's the second thing that you need to do when it comes to assessing your group programming. You got to define what the goal is, the end state, and then we've got to determine how are we actually going to measure it. The third thing that we need to do is define the metrics that will signify if a change has occurred in the right or the wrong direction. So taking it back to that very first example with the client that wants to lose 20 pounds. Well, that's pretty easy. If we measure their 200 pounds on day one and 3 months down the road, they are 205 pounds, we're not any closer to their goal. So we know that we need to make a change in the way that we are dealing with their goal. Same thing goes here. What are the metrics that you are going to objectively be able to look at and say, oh man, I thought that our programming was going to achieve this goal, but I set out to use these metrics to measure it by, and in fact, we're actually not going in that direction. So that is what is going to tell you, hey, we need to make a change. Then we've got to actually measure it. We've got to use these metrics and define, like, are we meeting our goal? So day one, let's say that you measure everybody that shows up in your group that day. That is your kind of testing cohort. And then 3 months down the road, you measure it, test it again. Okay, you need to do this regularly. And then the final thing is you need to make the adjustments or refinements as is needed. So what I want to walk you through now is just kind of a very general, concept of this at work in the real world. So let's say that you come to my gym. The goal of my gym's group programming is very simple. We want people to get healthy and happy. Okay? We want people's health to improve and their happiness to improve. How are we actually going to measure this? So this is where it's really important to define this. You need to have both objective and subjective measurements. So think of the concept of two brain, right? You know that the left brain is for the logical thinking, the numbers side, all right? Most guys fall into that category. Then you've got the right side of the brain, the creative, the more empathetic, the emotional, the feelings part of the brain, all right? So we've got the left and the right. You can also think of those as objective, so the data set, and subjective, how do I or do my clients feel about the goals and how we're progressing in here? So I've got to actually define how I'm going to measure it. And then I've got to make a call of, what am I going to do if I find that the changes are not occurring in the way that I think they should? What are those metrics that are going to say, hey, your group programming is actually not setting out and achieving the goal of getting your clients healthier and happier than you wanted it to? So what are those metrics? And then I've got to measure it regularly. How am I going to do that? So we're going to look at it like a Venn diagram. On one side, we've got healthy, if I could spell that, T-H-Y, and happy, all right? I want to maximize the amount of overlap in here, all right? So if everything is going right and I'm programming perfectly, and we're meeting our goals, I should really maximize the amount of area where those two circles overlap. The health and happiness both go skyrocketing, all right? But how are we going to actually define them? So on the health side, the objective measurements, you could have a couple of different things. You could say we want to see that your biomarkers, maybe blood work that you get done, is improving. Cholesterol is going down, my risk for cardiovascular disease is going down, my bone density is going up, my muscle mass is going up. So all these things biometrically that I can measure, I want to see that we are having improvements in. The other thing that we've seen pop up a lot lately over the last probably 5 to 10 years in our gyms is what we would call wearable technology, or just wearables. So something like an Apple Watch, a Whoop band is actually really popular these days at my gym. And these provide some good, relatively objective measurements on, is your client sleeping, eating, moving better and more often than they were before. So this can also fall into the objective category. One area that micro gyms in particular have been very, very good at measurements is in their fitness metrics. So, are your benchmark fitness times getting faster? Are you able to lift more weight? Can you run a further distance without stopping? So these would all be considered objective measurements. Subjectively on the health side is a little bit tougher to gauge, but it's up to you to set those determinations. So maybe it looks something like this. Is your client able to get out of bed without feeling pain at a 8 out of 10, 7 days out of the week? So maybe you give them some sort of subjective pain measurement scale that they have to fill out before they start class. Maybe you ask them to subjectively rate how well they felt like they slept the night before. But again, subjective, remember, those measurements are going to be much more about how the client internalizes how they are feeling about that particular metric. It's not about what you, the owner or the coach, thinks in terms of the effectiveness of your programming. You might feel like everybody is getting healthier and it might seem super exciting, but if the data doesn't show it and if the clients don't feel it, then it's really a moot point. Then we go to the other side of the circle, the other goal that we have, and that is to get people happier. So again, we need to be able to measure this from an objective, like data standpoint, also a subjective feelings from the client's perspective point of view as well. So again, how are we going to define this? So objectively, what you might actually use here is something called the happiness survey. I believe you can go to happiness-survey.com and it gives you like 25 to 30 questions where your client ranks them. And so that can give you an objective measurement. So maybe when you check in with them in regular intervals, for instance, a goal setting session or an athlete check-in, whatever you might term it at your particular gym, you have them fill out this survey again and we can determine objectively, are you getting happier? The other thing from a subjective point of view on the happiness index could be, how are you feeling in general? Are you having fun whenever you come to the gym? What does your consistency look like? So these are things that you can measure, all right? Now, here's the funny thing about getting people healthier and happier. Let's say, for instance, that all of my health benchmarks are improving. So, by all accounts, my benchmark times are improving, my biomarkers are improving, I'm doing all these things. So my health is really, really, really doing well. But what about happiness? So this is something to really, really consider deeply. If I've got a goal to get people happy and healthy, it's not just about the health side. So maybe in order to push these health metrics to that, far side, I've got to be at the gym more. Or I've got to say no to a lot more things with friends and family that would increase my happiness. So maybe, just maybe, you've got to make sure that your programming not only gets people healthy, but also keeps them happy. So maybe if you started putting in a ton of, static holds, farmer's carries, waiter walks in an effort to get people healthier, if you see over time, because of that one metric that you changed in order to get people healthier, is actually affecting their happiness, you have to be objective enough to look at that and say, wait a minute, this is the metric that we changed in order to improve something to get us closer to our goal. And it's actually having an unintended consequence of taking away people's happiness. You need to be objective enough to say that was the wrong call and I need to change something else. Because the goal really should be to get maximal overlap here if it's health and happiness. I think we can all agree on that. Here's the thing. It doesn't really matter what you think or how you feel about things at your gym if you're not actually measuring and taking account logically, objectively, what is going on with your clients. Let's think about it from a two-brain business perspective of measuring your leg and arm, your length of engagement and your average revenue per member. It's one thing to think that all of your clients have been showing up consistently for 3 years, but if you actually do the homework and measure your length of engagement and find actually people are staying less than a year before they move on, that's something that you need to go and then make adjustments to improve. Same thing with average revenue per member. Same thing with assessing your group programming. You need to measure it. And I'll tell you this, when it says measure it regularly, here's the key. If you are not doing goal reviews or athlete check-ins regularly with all of your clients, there is no way that you can say you are assessing your group programming from an objective point of view. Check out the handout that we have here. It'll walk you through these steps. Take your time and start measuring. I'm really anxious to learn what you find out about your gym and the changes that you make in your group programming to move your clients closer to that goal that you have set for them. Thanks for your time.